When I was in 4th grade, my family was still living in Denver, CO, in a small condo near my school. My brother, kindergartner at the time, and I only had to cross the street and walk between a couple of apartment buildings to get to the football field attached to our school. It was normally a pretty quick and safe trip to and from. My mother was taking night classes at NAU at the time, and her boyfriend, whom we lived with, would usually watch us in the evenings, although he wasn't off work until about 6:30 p.m. We grew up as latchkey kids, so this wasn't a big deal. One day, my brother and I were walking home together after school like we usually do, and had just gotten to the street in front of our home when a white car pulled up in front of us. The man driving the car didn't seem like your typical weirdo, maybe in his late 20s and looked pretty clean cut. Looking back, the fact that he was driving such a fancy car, a Benz I believe, and wearing such a crisp outfit didn't really fit in with our neighborhood. He asked my brother and I if our parents were home. I immediately got a serious sensation of stranger danger from this dude. I looked at our apartment across the street, then back at him, and in the most I'm not stupid tone I could find, I asked why. "It doesn't matter," he replied dismissively. "Are they home?" He seemed a little more insistent with his question and glanced around. I said yes, despite fully knowing that they were not home, and that my mum's boyfriend wouldn't be there for another 2+ hours. I figured it was better to lie and say yes. "What are they doing?" he asked, really looking us over. I then turned to my brother and ordered him, "Let's go." But he wouldn't follow me. I went to grab his hand and he quickly withdrew it with a sharp no and looked back at the guy. The guy then looked at both of us and then back at my brother, and with a facial expression that made my hair stand on end, he said, "Come closer, I have something for you." My brother started walking to the door of the car, and the guy was reaching with his hand out, and there was nothing in it, like he was about to grab him. I grabbed my brother's coat immediately and started hauling him towards our apartment as fast as I could. He was screaming for me to let him go, but I was so terrified that I just kept dragging him. The guy quickly put his car into gear and literally pulled out of there. My mother's friend started picking us up from school after that, and a PSA was issued to the community. I still get a little creeped out when cars slow down near me while I'm outside walking. It's been a long time since I've seen them, but the experience I had just 2 nights ago, it helped me remember why they're beyond mystifying and creepy. I'll include my other experiences at a later time, but in the feeling of utterly unnerving, this one takes the cake for me. So let me start off by saying that my husband and I live in Southern Cali. We've had hauntings that seem to come and go in both houses that we've lived in, but our new house, and we've been here for a year, nothing, and I mean zilch has happened. So, 2 nights ago, we get back from visiting family. We're both exhausted, and so we decide to head to bed. It's around 12 when we lay down, and after a few minutes, we passed out. About 2:15 or 2:20, I know because I looked at the clock, I wake up to my husband realizing that he hasn't plugged his phone in, and is getting up and getting that situated. I'm awake and I can't fall back to sleep right away, so he lays back down and we go back to cuddling. I'm facing away from him and looking towards the sliding glass doors that lead outside. Now, our sliding glass doors have blinds and curtains. I like complete darkness as I sleep, but there is a sliver of window showing, so he falls back asleep and after about 10 minutes rolls over. I decide to lay on my back at this point. Irritated, I can't seem to fall back to sleep. I close my eyes, but it only leads to some minor dozing, and finally I roll back over to face the window, and my eyes are still closed. But as I open my eyes, I see it. Literally, at the side of my bed by my feet is a shadow, and it's so dark that I can't see anything but a black human shape. It's blocking the window slits so naturally that I'm like, is my husband up again? Wondering why my husband is back up and on my side, I go to open my mouth when it hits me. Literally, his foot does. My brain processed this by a couple of more minutes of wide-eyed staring, followed by me yanking the covers over my head. I'm now terrified under the covers, and I know it's not an intruder, and I know it's something else, which prompts me to stay under the covers for a good 5 minutes, knowing that it should be gone when I come out. Slowly, I take the covers away, and it's gone. I sit up and take a sip of water, knowing that I have to get up early and staying up to go over this in my head isn't a good call, so I lay back down, facing away from the damn window. There was nothing else, and I woke up yesterday morning and told my husband. I say how never have I ever been filled with panic that my body had told me to throw the covers over myself like that, and my heart was racing, and worst of all was the sheer dread that I had that it wasn't going to be gone. So yeah, that's it. I'll definitely post my other shadow tales, as I have quite a few, but this is the newest and the most fear-inducing of them all. Please leave in the comments any shadow experiences that you've had and why, if it applies to you. They strike me as so menacing. I've been listening to these stories narrated on YouTube for about a year now, and decided that it was about time to share one of my own experiences. I was a 19-year-old new mum at the time that this all happened. My husband, now ex, came home from work with my 17-year-old brother in tow sometime after 1 a.m. They wanted to go out and get something to eat, and as I hadn't really left the house in months, I jumped at the opportunity. I grabbed the baby and put him in his car seat in the rear passenger seat. I called shotgun and my husband drove, and my brother crawled in the back with the baby. We live in a small town, so nothing is open this late within the town limits, so our only option was to go a few miles out of town to a nearby truck stop or gas station. Now, the building itself is pretty small, but the lot is huge. There are quite a few 18-wheelers lined up on the far side of the lot and a few cars parked in the front of the building. There are some street lamps in the lot, but they are far and few between, so the lot is mostly dark. We parked in one of the dark spots at the side of the building, closest to the Hardy's entrance. The baby had fallen asleep by then, so I told my bro and hubby to go in and order for me. They do, and I immediately locked the doors, as my mother had drilled into me since I was little. And boy, am I so thankful now that she did. My husband and bro had been gone for about 5 minutes, and I was just staring straight ahead and listening to music, when I catch movement out of the corner of my eye. I turn my head and see a man walking in my direction. He was probably mid-30s, with a mop of curly brown hair poking out from underneath a red baseball cap. I figured he was going towards the entrance to the restaurant, as it was at most 20 feet away from me, and went back to spacing out. A couple of minutes pass, and I hear a car door handle jiggle. I whip my head around and see that the man is pulling at the car door behind me, my baby's door. He gives up and takes 2 steps to my door. I quickly double and triple check that all the doors are locked, and they are. And he tries my door and fails, then walks to the other side of the car and tries those doors too. I'm freaking out and frozen in fear at this point. This is the age of flip phones, so not everyone had a cell phone at this time, and I definitely didn't have one. He circles the car 2 more times, checking each handle as he goes. I'm watching him this whole time in the mirrors, and he doesn't look directly at me once. I place my hand on the horn, and I made the decision to really lay into it if he pulls a weapon or tries anything else. I take a moment to try and get a look into the store at my brother and husband through the partially obscured windows and glass door, but I can't see them. I look in the mirrors to see the creeper's whereabouts, but he's gone. I turn around in my seat and still can't see him. He must have given up and left. I relax a little bit, but stay vigilant. Finally, my bro and hubby exit the restaurant, food in hand. I cannot explain the relief that washed over me just then. I unlock the doors for them and they get in, and my brother asks, "Hey, what was that guy doing crouched behind the car?" My pulse quickened. Seriously, he's still there. My bro pointed to one of the cars in front of the building and said, "No, when we walked to the car, he jumped up and ran to that car over there. He's laying flat in the back seat." Before you ask, no, we didn't call the cops. It's one of my biggest regrets to this day, in fact. We were all young and lacking in life experience. If it happened to me today, I would have called in a heartbeat to keep other innocents safe from this creeper. To this day, I don't know if he was after me, the baby, or the car, but whatever it was, he was up to no good, and I can only hope that he never gets the opportunity to hurt anyone else. This was 10 years ago, just after my parents divorced and were in the process of selling my childhood home. And my mum had moved across town, and my dad, who travelled for a living, he was gone for long stretches of time, leaving my older brother and I alone often. As teenagers, we didn't mind though. Even with this upheaval at home, our lives were fairly routine. Both of us worked and were in school, so we left and got home at the same times each day. At night, we'd go to the gym just outside of our neighbourhood for a couple of hours. My brother's friend, James, would join us. One night, James, my brother, and another one of our friends, Christopher, were hanging out at our house, washing their cars in preparation for the weekend. Since it was dark, my brother had borrowed my car keys to illuminate the driveway with my headlights so that they could see. When they were finished, my brother asked me if I felt like going to the gym with them, and I declined. I just wasn't feeling up to it, so they left me home alone. Before I went upstairs to my bedroom to play some music now that the house was empty, I noticed that the front door was unlocked and the back door was locked. This detail didn't particularly alarm me because we lived in a safe neighbourhood, centred by golf courses and a country club, in other words, and I had nothing to really worry about. I went to my room to listen to some loud music for about half an hour with my door shut, and then, hungry, I went downstairs to fix myself something to eat. And that's when I noticed that the front door was locked. I wasn't too concerned at this point. Perhaps I had locked it before I went upstairs. I didn't remember locking it, but it was the most rational explanation. But then I noticed that the back door was unlocked, and I definitely didn't unlock the back door. As irrational then as it seemed, it hit me with a jolt that somebody was in our house. My brother had left my car keys on the counter in the kitchen, and I grabbed them and ran out of the front door to my car. I put the keys in the ignition, and it didn't start. My brother had left the lights on, and the battery was dead. It was like being in a horror movie. Frantic, I called my brother, and since he had his headphones plugged into his phone listening to music while he worked out, he was forced to answer. "Hey, I think somebody was in our house," I said. I told him about the front door and how I didn't lock it, so either somebody was in our house or in the backyard. "Listen, can you please come home right..." And as I said this, a man with a miniature baseball bat comes from the side yard of our house. His pace was quick, as if he didn't want to be seen, but it slowed once he reached the road, where he walked normally, as if nothing had happened. I told my brother what I had just saw, and that I recognized him, and that it was our neighbor. My brother and his friends came rushing home about 10 minutes later, and I repeated the story. "Okay," my brother, a hothead, said. "We're going over to his house." I sat back at home after the four of us had checked every room in the house with my dad's gun, and it was clear that no one was there. When they came back, they told me that they'd knocked on the front door and an older woman had answered. The look on her face, James said, was like she'd been expecting us. And that's when her middle-aged son, the guy with the bat, came down. And my brother said that before he even spoke, he yelled out,
"I didn't break into anybody's house."
"We never said that," my brother had said. "We just wanted to tell you that somebody was in our house just now." The mother had taken on a protective, though somewhat submissive stance. "Listen, I'm so sorry. It won't happen again, I promise it." My brother and his friends saw in her eyes that she knew that they were telling the truth and that her son wasn't. "It better not," my brother said, looking up at her son behind her. When they got home, they recounted this story for me, and we began to dissect what had happened. We'd seen this man before. He was older, late 30s, early 40s, and lived with his elderly parents. He only seemed to come out at night when he would go on long walks around the neighborhood, muttering to himself, carrying a miniature baseball bat to fend off dogs, as he'd been overheard telling a neighbor. He obviously had mental health problems of some kind, and he'd obviously been watching our house and knew our routine. We determined that he may have mistaken my brother's friend Christopher for me, and thinking the house was empty, entered the unlocked front door. And when he realized that I was home, he then left through the back door and had hidden in the backyard until he thought that the coast was clear. How long he'd been inside, we weren't sure, but I'd been in my room for at least half an hour. Why he was breaking into our house, we didn't know, but we guessed it wasn't the first time that he'd done something like this. And it may have been the overactive and speculative imaginations of a bunch of teenagers, but we guessed he did it because running around someone's empty house, unbeknownst to them, gave him some kind of sick thrill. Perhaps stalking people gave him something to do, and it was clear to us that he probably couldn't help himself, and that he would probably do it again. I come to you with experiences that I had in the mid-90s when I was a teenager. I'm not the best writer there is, so bear with me as I attempt to write all of this down. So, when I was around 14 or 15, my family moved into a seemingly normal, cozy home in Savannah, Georgia. We were a family of 4, just my parents and my older sis. It was a really nice place at first. I had a generous amount of space throughout the home. There were beautiful hardwood and carpeted floors and a great backyard. We thought that it would be the perfect place to live in, but we were very wrong about that, and would end up moving out of that house after living there only a single year. It was quiet at first, nothing out of the ordinary, and it stayed that way for a little while. However, after about 2 or 3 months of living there, strange occurrences and events started happening. They started off as simple as things not being where we left them, to hearing footsteps and knocking in the night, and eventually to seeing actual apparitions. Before I tell you this next part, it's important I explain the way that our entertainment room was set up. The room was at the end of the house on the 2nd story. It only had one doorway, so the only way I could get out of the room was by going through that door. The room exits into a hallway where you can either go right or left. Going right would lead you into the kitchen and the rest of the house, while going left would lead you to my parents' room. Anyways, there was one night that I will never forget, and is the night which drove me to set up our family camera to try and record these occurrences. It was the summer of 1994, sometime in June. I was up at night playing Super Mario World on the SNES in the entertainment room. As I was contently playing my favorite game, I felt a sudden blast of cold air pass over me, which was weird as it was just the beginning of summer, and our AC was not the best in that house. I looked up from the TV and back at the door to see that it was fully open, when I remembered having shutting it most of the way prior to getting on the gaming console. That sent shivers down my spine, but I mustered up the strength to go over to the door and shut it all the way this time. After shutting the door, I returned to the console to resume gaming. It wasn't even 5 minutes later that I started to hear rattling coming from the door. I looked over immediately to see the door fling open. I was paralyzed with fear. The controller dropped out of my hands. I froze solid for a good 10 minutes, fearing that someone or something with ill intent would come through it. After about 15 minutes of nothing else happening, I summed up all my remaining courage and crept to the doorway to check it out. When I got to the doorway, I could hear faint footsteps from across the house. My heartbeat started racing, my breath narrowing, but I decided to peek out from the doorway to see if it was one of my parents, or maybe my older sister playing a cruel trick on me. But no, what I saw was far worse. Looking to the right of the hallway, I saw a black mass just hovering at the end of the hallway, and then it started making its way towards me. I let out a scream and bolted left to get to my parents' room. I remember bursting through their door, waking them up shouting about what I had just saw. My mum sprang up and looked disturbed, while my father grumbled and eventually sat up to listen to what I was saying. I looked behind me and there was nothing there anymore. Thankfully, I guess. My mum explained to me that she had also been experiencing weird occurrences and had an overall off-putting feeling about the house. My dad was somewhat of a skeptic, but he didn't disbelieve me too. After that night, I was dedicated to capturing events like this on tape. I set up our family camera in the areas around the house that felt the weirdest, or where the previous occurrences had happened. It took me a while to finally capture something, but I eventually captured a small collection of these phenomena. I have 3 clips that I can show right now, but I still have a few more that need to be transferred over onto my PC. Let me know if you guys want to see them, and thanks for listening to my story and checking out the clips if you did. G'day mates, it's Busta here. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here, and I hope you guys are all doing really well. For the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. If you would like more scary stories too, you can click on the card at the top right of your screen or on one of the annotations on your screen right now. As always guys, it would be awesome if you could like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates throughout the week. And also, if you would like content early and completely advert-free for as little as $1 a month, feel free to click on the link to my Patreon account and sign up there for regular MP3 format stories. Thanks again for tuning in and for all the love as always, guys, and I'll see you mates in the next one.